There once was a ship put to the skies. The name of the ship was the Enterprise. Her nacelles lit, her phasers armed, oh blow, you red shirts blow. Soon may the flagship come, bring us Earl Grey tea and Orion rum. One day when the scanning is done, engage and boldly go.
Hello everybody and welcome to the Star Trek Wars Council Roundtable. We're talking about the movies, and this time we're talking about Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, or as it was in our case, Star Trek 3, The Search for Joe. But unlike the movie, we've not managed to find him. So instead, I'm Senior Council Member James King, and joining me is Lainey.
Hello there. I was going to say, I really hope that I'm not the one that finds Joe abandoned on a planet somewhere.
He'll be fine,
He'll be fine, yeah.
And Alex.
That me? Hi.
That's you.
That's me. Hi.
And joining us this time, Ronald Wilson.
Who's on mute?
He's got back on mute.
Ronald's on mute. And new to the round table this time, Derek.
No, I have been a silent council member for many years, always supportive, but very quiet and shy. Thank you for inviting me on to this wonderful, wonderful thing.
Hey, you're welcome. It's always good to have new faces, and even returning faces sometimes, but we're two of them, Joe and Ronald, are having technical issues, so you know what, it's quite in keeping with the theme of the film, because the film's all a bit of a ragtag kind of thing going on in this one, so you know what, we're being thematic, kind of, maybe.
Ron's off mute. Hello, Ron.
And he left.
Okay, we will...
Search for Ron.
The search for Ron. All right, let's make a start then, guys. So, first thing to talk about, as we usually do, is your first impressions of The Search for Spock. So, when did you first see it? What do you remember thinking about it? We'll start with Derek. What's your initial take on Search for Spock?
Oh, when did I first see it? I remember someone was talking about how they had it on an old VHS tape that was taped off the television. I had Wrath of Khan like that, and Star Trek 3 was actually, this shows how old I am, it was on an old Betamax tape.
Way.
Which I remember, yeah. So, which was supposed to be superior to VHS, but anyway, so I had Star Trek 2 on VHS and Star Trek 3 on Betamax. So I always thought 3 was the lesser because it was on a crappier videotape, but I've actually grown to enjoy it quite a bit. And so my first impression, I saw it when I was probably 7-ish, maybe 8-ish. What is it, 84 it came out? I'm trying to remember.
That sounds about right, yeah.
Yeah, that put me about 8 or 9. And it was always just in my house, ubiquitous, that I would always watch it. Enjoy it quite a bit. Not my favorite, but among my favorites.
So, sorry, this is going off on a bit of a tangent already, but so you had a Betamax and a VHS. Did you have them both hooked up to the same TV, or were they like in different rooms? Or
from what I remember, my dad had them all hooked up to the same TV.
Awesome.
So we had to change all the cables and everything, and this is back when everything was cabled, and so the back of the TV was like 100 different cables. And I think Star Trek 3, maybe that was the copy original. I know Star Trek 2 was copied off of CBS, so we had all the commercials, but
yeah.
Is that why you had the Betamax and the VHS?
So my dad loved that kind of stuff. So I think he got it on sale, or I don't know. He got it on sale, and so flashes of memories. But yeah, I don't think we ever had a laser disc, but we have pretty much everything else in the world.
We may have Ronald back. Ronald, are you here?
Yeah. Okay, so you can hear me and see me now?
We can.
Indeed.
And I can hear and see you now.
We've done it.
Yay.
So
maybe it'll actually work.
What are your first memories of Search for Spock then, Ronald? Do you remember when you first saw it, what you thought of it?
Let's see. I was around for all the movies, but I saw them out of order. The first one I saw in the theaters, when it was in the theaters, was number 4. But in the meantime, my first VHS a friend of ours copied 2 and 4 onto tape for us, and then later on I recorded 1 and 3 off of the television. But, so I was kind of in and out of order at first, and later on I got all 5 on widescreen VHS and so on and so forth. And so, I have a history with it. And I got the novelization.
Awesome.
Of course, I've got the novelizations of all the movies. In terms of Search for Spock, there's like so many more story elements and things going on in the novel than in the movie, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, it was... I mean, the movies is where I started with Trek in general anyway, so there you go.
Excellent. What about Alex? What are your memories of Search for Spock? We know you're a big fan of Star Trek 4, and we know that you like the fact David gets killed. But when did you first see Search for Spock?
So don't know, an exact year. I'm obviously, a lot younger than some of you guys. So what are these VHS things you're talking about?
Oh my God.
Whole series on VHS.
I was there, Gandalf, 3,000 years ago.
I have a special collector's edition. They're a DVD widescreen collection. So that's what I first watched it off of, was actually the DVD. So first watching it, I didn't mind it. It's a decently made film that explores lots of interesting storylines that they set it up so that you can watch Star Trek 4.
That's your only con. It's Star Trek 4.
From Star Trek 4.
Yeah.
As when I first saw it, it's a decent film. It's later on that I had.
Fair enough. Lainey, what about you?
I honestly have no idea when I first saw this. It's just patchworked into my upbringing, I guess. I probably just watched it when it was on the TV. Yeah. I don't think we ever had a recording of it. Or I didn't own it until I got my whole movie collection. So yeah, I've just watched it many times on the television, and it was just the one where Spock comes back to life and the Enterprise blows up. That's it. I think I was definitely an adult by the time I realised it was Christopher Lloyd that was the Klingon. So
yeah, I have a slightly weirder history of this one. It's like, as I said last time, I watched Wrath of Khan loads and loads and loads when I was a kid. And we went to the video rental place up the road, which was also an off-license. It was in them days when off-licenses would rent out VHSs. And I want to give out big shout-out to Eileen for running that VHS place for years and years. And she would always... David, her husband, he always had a few dodgy ones that he'd got, Pirates at Cinema films. And he'd be like, if you don't tell anyone, I'll rent you this one. And he used to let me rent 18s and stuff when I was a kid. If my dad said it were okay, he'd be like, if your dad said you're allowed to watch this one. Yes, David, I am 8 years old and my dad said I can watch The Terminator. Thank you very much. So I asked my mum if we could rent Star Trek 3 because I'd seen 2 loads of times. And I'd seen the trailer and it looked really cool. And the tag is in the trailer, and because there was no perspective, it was just a close-up shot of the tag. I thought it was going to be a massive, big space monster. I was like, this is going to be awesome. And then I watched it, and there wasn't a big space monster, so I was like, oh, it's rubbish. And my mum was like, well, just stick to Star Trek 2 in future. You like that one. So I didn't watch it again for quite a while, I think, until we did tape it off the telly, and yeah. And so it's always been one that I've sort of watched in rotation, and yeah, we'll get on to what we all think of it then. So, let's move on to the pros. Who wants to go first with pros? Any volunteers?
I think Alex has already given her one pro, that, it sets up her favourite film.
Yeah, let's have Alex's pros. David gets killed and it sets up 4.
Yeah, that's 2 pros.
Yeah, those are the 2 main pros that you really need in this movie. And the music. The music's good. I like the music. Music's always good.
Yeah, it's
3 pros.
James Horner in this one, isn't it? Pre-Titanic. Any others?
I'll piggyback on the music. I have it both as a pro and a neutral because I think it's the 3rd best theme after 2 and 4. But when I watched it earlier this week, it got stuck in my head, and I can't get it out of my head. So it's a neutral in terms of it's an earworm right now for me.
I've got the monkey stuck in my head. Like Hey Hey with her for like 2 days now.
You can't blame that on Star Trek 3.
No, but I would much rather be here in Star Trek 3.
What is it they say? Apparently, if you get something stuck in your head, you've got to think of the Pink Panther theme tune, and that takes it over or something. See, there you go. Monkeys is gone. So, Derek, do you have any more pros?
Yeah, a few that haven't been mentioned. I do love the Targ because it reminds me of The Dark Crystal, which is one of my favorite all-time films. And the sliminess, I'm okay with that. It looks like it's straight out of Dark Crystal or Labyrinth. And I really appreciate there's not a lot of alien variation in this movie. I think Starfleet's very Earth-centric in this movie, so I would appreciate it more. So, and I do love Sulu's outfit so much so that it carries on to 2 movies. That is the awesomest outfit that I would love to emulate but could never pull off. But overall, I love the message of hopefulness in this one. Whereas 2, which is probably my favorite, but it's dark. Well, okay, so 3 is hopeful despite the fact that David is, some people see that as a positive. But it's got hopeful music. It's always kind of in the background that this is new life. And I love that it continues the theme, life out of death. So, yeah, those are my general pros.
Ronald, what have you got?
For the pros?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, I'm biased towards it because it's one of my favorite Star Trek movies. 2 and 3 and 4 are very close to the top and interchangeable, I guess. Of course, one of the pros is the score. Can you see that with it? Okay. And, James Horner shifts the emphasis from the high adventure to the drama pretty well. And he comes up with a new sound for the Klingons, even though it sounds like an old railway warning bell. And I like that it's an interesting movie that it introduces a lot of designs that we take for granted now. The new Klingon bird of prey, the Starfleet starbase shape of the mushroom, and so on. And and it does it's like the maximum drama for our characters. It's like the biggest test for our characters and all that. And I like the peek into Vulcan culture towards the end and the spirituality, weird things about that. And I mean, it's generally a movie full of pros. I mean, anything that's wrong with it is just small little nitpicky things that don't really matter to me, and I'm too busy enjoying all the other highly dramatic stuff that's going on in it. So yeah, it's a great movie for me.
Okay, Lainey, what have you got?
Okay, let's find some things that's not been brought up. I think all of my notes are quite heavily weighted towards the beginning of the film because I was very distracted by a debate about the Snyder Cut with James and Jeremy. So
it wasn't much of a debate.
I think I was trying to figure out whether you were winding me up or not.
Oh, that time. I thought you meant when we actually recorded it because that was fairly one-sided. There wasn't much of a debate.
Okay. So I have got right at the beginning where the Christopher Lloyd Klingon and his lover, presumably, having an exchange, and he's basically sort of like, well, you've got to die now. And she's like, well, fair enough. I was just like, that's so ruthless. But I loved it. I liked that the Enterprise was damaged when it returned to space dock. Kind of a bit of continuity. realism. I've written down the Sarek Kirk mind meld of Spock's death. So I don't know why I wrote that down, but I seem to like it.
It's good.
Genesis, obviously. Shall I go on? I've got more.
Yeah.
All of the Bones. Everything that Bones does in this movie is brilliant. There's a point where Sarek rings up to the ship. I can't remember what the name of the ship is. And she's like, there's a boy here, and it's Spock. And there's a helmed woman. This is very visual, but she's kind of like, really? She's lost her mind. I enjoyed that. And right at the end, so going from that to the end, because Snyder happened, when Spock looks at Kirk, he raises, he says, your name is Jim, and then raises his eyebrow. I was like, oh, I love it. So those are my pros. Okay. I have neutral zones.
Oh, we'll get on to the neutral zones. I've got some pros, though. I think Ronald touched on this with the space dock, but I really like the amount of new ships introduced in this one. I think it's probably, before we get to the days when we could do CGI, this is probably the film, episode, whatever, that introduces more new designs in one film than any other. Because we get the Uberth class, which I know Jordan had issues with it looking like a top hat, but I quite like the design of the Uberth class. The only sort of issue I have with it is if you look at the design of it, if you're on the bridge and you need to get to the engineering hull, the turbolift's going to have to take you right out to the side, down one of the arms, and then... So maybe not the most efficient ship design. But I suppose the Romulan Warbird's even worse. But I like the look of the Uberth class. I like the look of the Excelsior class. I think they've obviously taken the design of the Enterprise and just made it sleeker and bigger and classier, and I really like that. And that is probably one of the ships that we see the most because it was in TNG all the time, the Excelsior class ship. And obviously, eventually, it gets a slight redesign and becomes the Enterprise B, but I do think that's one of the definitive Starfleet ships. And speaking of definitive, the Bird of Prey is just amazing. I think, other than the Enterprise refit / Enterprise A, the Bird of Prey is my favourite Star Trek ship ever. And that gets its first outing in this film, which is brilliant. We get that little pirate ship that Lainey mentioned that gets blown up. And I never knew until very, very recently which way round that ship's meant to be. It's sort of almost a jellyfish shape. And the wedge bit is at the front. But I always thought, just because of the way it's oriented on screen, that it was the other way, which is just a weird thing that I've got. But, so I like the pirate ship design. And obviously... the space dock is awesome. Possibly leads to some weird kind of continuity errors when you get to TNG. And this is true, actually, of the Bird of Prey and the space dock, because they reused, like, the models and the footage from this film. But because the Galaxy-class ship's meant to be so much bigger than the Constitution-class ship, you get these weird things where a Bird of Prey is the same size as the Enterprise D, and it's like, oh, hang on, that's only meant to have 12 people on it. And... you get a bit where the Enterprise D goes into space dock, and it's like, yeah, but that's the size of the Enterprise A. Like, But I'm sure there was some sort of fan-pleasing explanation in the book saying, well, it's, the Bird of Prey is such a good design that all they do is make bigger ones, and, it's bigger on the inside. Anyway, so yeah, the ships and models I think are really good. I like the portrayal of the Klingons. Like, this is the first time, really... we start to get the Klingons as we will come to know them. Like, obviously, they're in a few episodes of TOS, but they're just really generic bad guys. And they have a little cameo at the start of the motion picture, but we don't really get to know them. Whereas this one, we get to see a little bit about what makes the Klingons tick. And this is sort of jumping way, way, way forward in the Star Trek timeline, but... if you look at what the Klingons are worried about in this film, they're like, we're worried about the flag of the Federation flying in the breeze and all this stuff. So they're worried about the Federation encroaching on their way of life, which is something that's picked up in Discovery, and the Klingons are very kind of worried about it there. So I actually like the continuity of that. What else did I have? Oh, I like just some of the flourishes that Nimoy as a director uses. So you have like the mind meld scene that you mentioned, Lenny, with Sarek and Kirk. And when Sarek starts repeating back Spock's lines, I don't know whether it's Leonard Nimoy's voice that they've dubbed over or whether it's just Mark Leonard doing a really good Leonard Nimoy impression. But I just think that's brilliant, and it really resonates with you. And similarly, when Bones speaks in Spock's voice when he says scanning, indication is negative. Yeah, I just think that's...
Horner helps a lot, too.
What's that, sorry?
Yeah, James Horner helps with that scene a lot, too. Yeah.
Yeah, you get sort of like the Vulcan-y refrain of the music, yeah. So I think all that's great. I like that for one of the first times we see sort of the seedier, more down-to-earth side of the Star Trek universe. You get Bones going to this bar and, you get the impression for one of the first times that there's people who are not part of Starfleet, but they're still going around in space like these pirates or whatever they are. So I like that we delve into that a little bit for the first time. And I don't like the destruction of the Enterprise because it's, very sad, but I like that it's given the gravitas that it deserves. Like when the Enterprise D goes in Generations, spoilers, I don't think you get the emotional heft of it, but they really do play it up where you've got them stood on the hill and they're watching it go through the atmosphere and stuff. And I think the Enterprise deserves that. But I think it's also indicative of the fact that we've got to the third film and Star Trek is comfortable with embracing its own legacy to this extent and go, this is something that's huge. This is really meaningful. So, yeah. Oh, and the last thing, I love the bit where Kirk has that Klingon guy and he says, I do not deserve to live. And then he says, you said you would kill me. And Kirk says, Kirk says, sorry, fine, I'll kill you later. And just sends him off, and then he says, I lied. So I think that's great.
That was John Larroquette, wasn't it? I was trying to see that. It was so hard to distinguish. I love him, but he was so good that he just kind of disappeared behind the makeup, and I was trying to figure out which one was him.
Yeah, he's really good. And some of the looks on his face, like when he says feed the tag, and it's just his eye, he gets almost Gowron eyes going on in that bit. So really good. Neutral zones then. Who said they had neutral zones? Lenny, you said you had neutral zones?
It's not. It's more one observation. Oh no, two observations and a question. One of the things I noticed was that Shatner was over pronouncing everything.
No.
Yeah, but I had quite recently just randomly watched that episode of Friends that is it's just before Monica and Chandler's wedding, where Joey's in that film with that famous actor who I should know the name of.
Gary Oldman.
And he's like getting upset because he's spitting in his face. And then he learns that apparently that's how you act. You spit over each other because you're over pronunciation of words. And Shatner was doing that a lot. So I was just sort of like, meh. And also I found it interesting that they were talking about the temperature in Celsius, which I guess maybe just the whole of Earth had adopted that system, whereas my understanding is the Americans use Fahrenheit.
I don't know.
Open question. You work in Fahrenheit, not Celsius?
Yeah, and
I work Fahrenheit.
On my job, I work Celsius, but I work Fahrenheit.
Interesting.
Celsius is for people who want to count.
I just find it very confusing. Anyway, and my question: Spock was inside Bones and had Spock's memories. Therefore, Bones knows about Discovery. Question.
Oh, yeah. Technically it would do. But does does when they take the memories out, does he forget all of it, or does he remember remembering it?
That's a good question.
Maybe he just decides not to bring it up.
Yeah, he's probably honouring the agreement never to. Yeah, but yeah, good point. So we're making a list.
Does he have access to like all the memories, or is Spock like Spock's memory still blocking Bones out of certain bits and pieces?
Maybe.
I feel like Spock's like spirit would like subconsciously block out certain bits of his past that even when he's dead, he still wouldn't let anybody know. Like, over my dead body, but also not over my dead body.
Especially Bones.
I was going to say, I hope you blocked all the Pon farr moments every 7 years. So
yeah.
Doesn't have to live through that.
Or not all of his memories returned to him, and he actually doesn't remember Discovery from this point onward.
Oh.
Or his brother. Oh, his sister. His brother. His sister.
He has got a brother.
I never remember his brother.
We're going to find out in 2 months that he's got a brother.
Well, we all forgot about his brother.
I wish I could forget about it.
Anyone else got any neutral zones then?
I can't think of any.
I have a few.
Go on.
Let's see. The graphics, they moved from about an Atari 5200, which is a game system graphics, to about an Apple IIe level. And so it's an upgrade, but it's still very, and actually there was, I forget which James Bond movie it was, but the video game they had on Earth when Bones is looking for a ship, that was straight out of like the 3D hologram video game. It was straight out of a James Bond movie.
Never Say Never Again.
Yes, there we go.
The unofficial one.
Yep.
Yes, the unofficial, the one that
Thunderball 2.
So that was a little bit, Doogie Howser's dad was in this. James B. Sicking was the captain of the Excelsior.
I see. So, right.
Yeah, I'm not pro or con for him. It's like, oh, there's Doogie Howser's dad. Doogie Howser. And Starfleet now has 3 ships in the Alpha Quadrant. So, which, is an improvement now.
Yeah. They won't have in the previous. Yeah, they won't have by Star Trek 5, but yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. I think those are pretty much just minor stuff that just kind of comes up, and it does feel a little bit cheaper than Star Trek 2, and Star Trek 1's just a giant expensive mess, so I won't even, but it just feels more like a little bit of a television, and perhaps that's because of the recap at the beginning, but it just feels like things are just a little bit cheaper and using stuff from before, which is fine, but it's a neutral zone.
Yeah. I've got a couple as well. I noticed this time for the first time that the Excelsior has seating restraints on it. They've got like these arms of the chairs that they can swing in, and it kind of holds them in place, which everybody says, oh, why don't the starships have seatbelts and things? And it's neutral zone because at least the thought's there, but they look rubbish. I mean, they're not going to save anybody, so at least they're thinking about it. My other neutral zone is the big fight at the end between Kirk and Kruge starts randomly. Like, they're just sort of looking at each other and, giving it a bit of mouth and all this. But the reason the fight actually starts is because there's kind of an earthquakey thing and the rock that Kirk's on lifts up and he falls onto Kruge, and then it's kind of like, oh, well, we might as well start fighting now, So it's just weirdly random how the climactic fight actually kicks off. Does anyone else have any neutral zones before we move on to cons? No, let's go then. So, I know Alex has been dying to give us the cons. So, Alex, what have you got for cons?
Okay, so let's see. So this is the opening. It seemed uneventful. So Bones' portrayal of Spock was good in some ways, but I put it as a con. I feel like they pushed parts of that a bit harder than I think they would have melded together, like, as a person. If we put 2 of them together and made them into one person, like we did with Neelix and Tuvok. I don't think what we got is what actually they would have been like. I think he was a little weird on that side. And then stealing the Enterprise. Starfleet's secure. Like, I get how good Gotti is and Uhura and like the crew of the Enterprise, but I feel like them stealing the starship was. They should have just been better security measures there. Starfleet needs to step up their game on that. And then the Klingons with Genesis. Starfleet could have protected Genesis a little better. The planet area. There's like no patrol ships around there that would stop the Klingons before they even got to Genesis. And they're just super aggressive the whole time. Like, I get that's personality, but like on the planet, I feel like they could have handled that situation better. And then David lasted for a few minutes longer than I would have liked. They kept waiting and waiting and waiting. It's finally okay. They get rid of him. It's like, okay, there we go, something good.
Do you hate him so much because you think he might have actually like killed his mum? Because there's no mention of her. She's as good. Like, has he just tried to, like, is he offed her so that he's in charge of the project?
Oh, yeah. That's 100% his fault. Yeah.
He wants sweet Starfleet grant money.
I feel like he was the fault for Genesis. Like, the whole Genesis problem, that was his fault. He could have done a better job with that. And then, of course, like you said, the fight scene, you put it as a neutral zone. I definitely put that as a con. The whole organization behind the fight scene was just badly done. I was suffering the entire time watching that. And then, of course, the Enterprise blowing up, that's a con. I love the Enterprise. It's sad. And they're just like, hey, let me just blow up this ship. Okay, well, why? At least they get a new Enterprise. But, it's still sad. It's still a con. It's a con no matter what. And then having to leave in a Klingon ship. Like, being in a Klingon ship, definitely a con. And then I think at that point we're at the credits. So, the end. Put the credits in the pro. I'll put those in the pro.
Ronald, what have you got?
For cons, I really can't think of anything. I hear other people complain about plot contrivances in this movie, but I'm just so invested in everything that I overlook it. Yeah.
Good, man. I like the attitude. Derek, have you got any?
Sure, I have a few. The first one, and I don't want you to think that I have this on my mind all the time, but I'm a nurse, so the Grissom looks like a suppository to me with two handles. So I'm only thinking about because I have to deal with that occasionally in my job. So it looks exactly like one. There's no strong female representation. You could say about this about just about any movie in the 80s and 90s. Unfortunately, I wish who was the strong female woman at the end, the priestess.
Talar.
Yeah. I liked her. She could have been in it more if they were looking for, but Uhura doesn't really get any kind of. She gets a little bit of snarkiness, but that's about it.
Yeah, they just leave her halfway through, don't they? And yeah, I never get why she doesn't go with them. It's weird.
Yeah, that is weird. And like I mentioned before, this is except for the Klingons and the Vulcans, this is pretty human-centric. This one, I like my non-binary, I like my different representation of Star Trek, and I know they'll get to that eventually. So a tiny little con is when they show basically all of Star Trek 2, but they missed my favorite scene in Star Trek 2 when Spock is dying in the room and he adjusts his uniform just a little bit because he's trying to still be formal. Oh, that's the one that breaks me every time. That's one of my favorite time movements in any movie, and they didn't include that. But on the whole, actually, my cons are pretty nitpicky and small. So I think that's about it. My pros definitely outweigh my cons.
Lainey, have you got any?
Yep. Okay, so this first one, I was just thinking, this is probably a neutral zone because even though it was distracting, it was still fun. If you're just listening to it, anytime Christopher Lloyd is talking, it's just Doc Brown. Mm-hmm. So because I was multitasking whilst I was doing this, it was kind of, in my peripheral vision. And I just kept hearing Doc Brown going, what? Hey, what? So, yeah, it was amusing, but distracting also. That jerk who was stopping the refit did not like that guy. I guess he had to, he had to be there. That we needed the conflict so that they could steal the ship and blah, blah, blah. But, he was annoying. I think Kirk was wearing this when he was meeting with Sarek, which was his 80s space tracksuit. So this tracksuit that every kid that I knew wore in the 80s, but it was a space version. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, you know the one I'm talking about. Yeah. And on fashion, I know the girls on the main pod mentioned Chekhov being really left out of the fashion in this film, but at one point he's actually dressed like a handmaiden, as in blessed be the fruit. The Excelsior captain is a cockwomble. I can't remember why.
Yes, it's fair.
I can't remember why, but that made it in the notes. The interior of the space station was a bit Star Wars.
Mm.
And when Klingons speak English rather than Klingons, does ag me throughout the whole of Star Trek. But they speak Klingon with subtitles loads at the beginning, and then all of a sudden they're speaking to each other in English. And I can kind of make logical sense of it that they would speak Klingon to each other, and then when there's humans around, that they would speak English. But yeah, it's just sort of pick a lane, do one or the other.
Yeah,
and that's me.
Yeah, I've just got a couple to add, and this one's really nitpicky, and I feel bad for writing it down, really, but it does annoy me, so... so the line that annoys me is the Admiral guy who's wanting to decommission the Enterprise. He goes, Jim, the Admiral... why is he doing Kirk's voice? I don't know. He goes, Jim, the Enterprise is 20 years old. It's like, really? The Enterprise is 20 years old? Wait a minute, let's work this out. So... this is meant to be about at least 10 years after the original series, and they've done a 5-year mission, so that's 15. Then 10 years before that, Spock was on it with Pike, so that's 25 at least. Then there's Captain April, who is canon because he's in the animated series, and that's currently canon, so, we're talking at least another 5-10 years there. And that's before we even get to Discovery, where we find out that Pike's had 5-year missions, and also... the Enterprise is a lot more than 20 years old. Then Kirk, Lainey, you touched on this with Carol's mysteriously disappeared. But clearly because they don't want to pay Bibi Besh, I believe the actress's name is, clearly they don't even want to pay her any likeness rights because they've got the Genesis video, but Kirk's taken it over. So has Kirk been in this mission and been like, actually, there's a bit of money to be made here. So I'm going to be the spokesperson for the Genesis. So he's there going this project called Genesis. And it's like, how have you managed to inveigle your way into this, Kirk? Which reminds me, an old friend of mine sort of had a theory about William Shatner's acting and his vocal inflections and everything. And he said that it's actually because he's sort of got narcolepsy or something, so... he does it to keep himself awake, so he goes Captain's log, we are in orbit around a Klingon planet, and we are going to be making first contact with the Romulan delegate. And I'm like, yeah, there might be something to that, but he does that a bit on the Genesis video. So yeah, I don't get what he's done to Carol and how he's overtaken everything.
Who Killed Carol, the podcast series.
Exactly. Yeah, true crime series.
True crime.
Kirk's there well, I just, she showed me a son that I'd never met. And where's that son now, Kirk? He's dead as well. Oh, Captain Kirk. Anyway, the Excelsior captain, who we've established is a cockwomble, but why has he got a little stick? What is going on with the little stick? Like, does he point at stuff? Yeah, I don't.
Oh, I just remembered which guy it is. Isn't he woken up at one point?
Yeah,
and he's just a complete moron.
And there's one where he's filing his nails in one, and then
when they're stealing the Enterprise, and he's just like,
and he's got his little stick like he's a drill instructor or something. So I don't know what his game is. He obviously gets sacked though because Sulu, as we know, becomes the captain. During the fight scene, so I'm agreeing with Alex on this one. There's a bit where Kirk goes for a kick and Crude catches his foot, and then the camera cuts back to the longest shot in human history because it is so clearly not William Shatner doing this stunt, and Kirk sort of does a backflip off of the Klingon. But it's so blatant because they pull the camera so far back that it's just ridiculous. So yeah, that's my cons. I do like this film. I think it stands up really well. We'll go into his final opinion on it then. So yeah, I think there's this thing of the odd numbered ones are rubbish, and I don't think that's true. I think because of the reputation that 1 and 5 have got, 3 kind of gets lumped in with them. But it does suffer by being a bridging film between Wrath of Khan and Voyage Home. Like, I think Wrath of Khan, even, a non-Trekkie can really enjoy it. It's a great action sci-fi film. Voyage Home is a great sci-fi comedy film, and again, I think a casual audience can really enjoy it. This film, I think, is a really good film, but I think a casual audience would struggle with it a little bit more. I think a lot of it relies on, firstly, you having seen Wrath of Khan, and secondly, you having some degree of affection for the characters. So I can see why it is not held in as high a regard as the films on either side, but I do think it gets a bit overlooked as
that
a
motion
result.
is seconded by the councillor for Southeast.
Does anyone else have any final thoughts on the film then?
Yeah, I really forgot to mention Savik, but that's because I hate her too much. I didn't want to remember her.
Oh yeah, we're going to mention the Pompar.
Forgot to mention that.
Oh yeah, we've not talked about that.
Yeah, I think we just wanted to forget that ever happened.
Yeah.
What I want to know is how many years does Spock age on this planet? So how many times are Savik's services needed?
Okay, on IMDb, they give specific ages for the actors that were cast. Okay, so we've got Spock age 9.
Right, we'll rule that one out.
Spock age 13.
We'll say no. We'll try and keep this family friendly.
Spock age 17.
Right,
Definitely.
she's in there. Or he's
Spock
in there.
age 25.
Definitely.
Yeah, so at least twice.
At least what? It's Nancy twice.
Yeah. Well, it's not Nancy, is it?
That's a lot of Ponfar in a few days.
I had a nickel for every time.
Oh my God, I see what you mean. That he had, even at 7?
Well, he'll have had it, because 17, so...
They're not just from puberty situations.
Yeah, okay, so we'll assume that the first time he goes through Ponfar is when he's 17, but because he ages rapidly, he's also 25, so he goes through it twice, while Savik is the only person who could relieve the symptoms.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is, on the main podcast, Lita said that maybe she'd have blistered hands, but I'm thinking maybe that's not the part of her body that would be sore.
On another note, related to
but maybe it's over quickly. Sorry, if he reaches the different age quickly, maybe
probably at 17, almost certainly. Maybe at 25, I don't know.
Although I started thinking, when did Spock start to this whole process? Because we don't get to see zygote Spock or fetus Spock.
True.
Really cool.
I mean, because originally it's old Spock body, so presumably he got de-aged really quickly and then caught back up. It's quite convenient, really, that we don't see how it started, so that they don't have to address that. They can just go, yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to see like baby Spock. Well, there's no womb, but somehow like baby Spock through the womb, giving the Vulcan hand.
Good question. Does this Spock have a belly button?
Well, that is a good question.
That's what we need to know. We'll have to see if there's any shirtless scenes. I don't think there is, but maybe.
So he doesn't know about Discovery, and he doesn't have a belly button. He's not really Spock.
That's what we've
He's
discovered.
Fake Spock.
Yeah.
From this point on, it's fake Spock.
Fake Spock, yeah. So, yes, shall we... We'll rank this film then. So, the ongoing list so far goes... At the top of the tree is Star Trek 2, then it's Star Trek 1. I'm thinking this is probably going to go in between the two. That's where I would put it. Does anyone disagree? Anyone want to put it above Wrath of Khan or below Motion Picture?
No,
That's it.
Right. See, this section of the show will get interesting one time.
Let's jazz it up a bit because,
Well, we did that last time,
Is it better or worse than the Snyder Cut?
Well, obviously it's worse than the Snyder Cut because that's the greatest film ever made.
No, it's better. Look, 4 hours of Batman and Superman and...
There's not 4 hours of Superman.
No, Superman's on here.
Let's not go to DC.
Yeah, let's...
4 hours of superheroes in general.
Let's not go Snyder Cut again. I'm all Snyder Cutted out.
What was the standard last time? Rocky 4?
So Rocky 4, yeah.
And Ant-Man and the Wasp.
And Ant-Man and the Wasp. So, the official list then goes the Snyder Cut, obviously. Oh. Then Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan, Rocky 4, Star Trek 3, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Star Trek 1. That's how I'd do it.
Excellent.
Apart from...
Are you keeping a note of that, including all of the other...
I'm writing it all down, don't worry. Look, there's my pad. So we just got time for some alternative fun facts before we quit. Now, you may think that I've written these down as we've gone along because I forgot to write them down, but no, these are actual alternative fun facts. So, the reason the Genesis device is not featured again in the films is because Phil Collins threatened to sue Paramount for the use of the name. The tag that featured...
That's so bad.
The tag that featured alongside Christopher Lloyd became so attached to him that Lloyd actually took it onto his next film, and under heavy makeup, the tag actually played Einstein in the Back to the Future trilogy. And finally, this film caused the ongoing feud between George Takei and William Shatner. William Shatner was known for practicing his lines in his car on the way to work, and George Takei secretly fitted a self-destruct mechanism so that when Shatner was rehearsing his lines for setting the self-destruct sequence for the Enterprise, it actually caused his car to blow up.
Genesis! I can't hear the word without hearing the name.
No, Connor's done that to all of us for years.
I didn't even know, and I think I said this on the main pod, I didn't know that was in this film.
Oh, I knew that's what he was. I knew that's what he was going for, yeah. But yeah, he's good, that guy. How can you be deaf with ears that big? They were trying to sort of make him like Yoda, weren't they? Like, they were talking in a weird way, like, money, you name, planet, or else ship, no. He had that weird way of talking. Anyway, so... Thank you to everybody for taking part. We'll be back next time to talk about The Voyage Home. Before then, you'll hear the main podcast discussing Voyage Home, though they may not be as happy with it as Alex is, but,
Greatest film ever.
So get ready, get writing down your notes. You've got a whole month to do your prose. And yeah, I think about...
Oh my God. What if she does a whole month of prose?
One last thing to say.
Go for it.
About... Lenny brings up her issues with Christopher Lloyd voicing Krug and her familiarity with him. It's just so funny because that same year, Christopher Lloyd was portraying John Big Butte in The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai.
Yeah.
Then a year later, he's Doc Brown in Back to the Future. And then a year later, the crew makes his ship into a time machine. So that goes right back to the mid-'80s. So it's all a weird circle.
Yeah, it's sort of a bit of weird predestination in Christopher Lloyd's career in that stage.
Can everything be linked back to Christopher Lloyd?
And then he was
like a Kevin Bacon situation.
Then he was in Fringe, wasn't he? And that's all weird. Yeah, he was in Fringe.
I do not remember him being in Fringe.
Well, he is.
Well,
I'm sorry.
I'm not going to argue.
I'm sorry, but he is. He is. You know what? He is. He is. You can check. That. You can check and everything. Check it on IMDb. He's in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest as well.
He's in Back to the Future, you know.
Yeah, and Back to the Future too.
Where do we go? Most recently, is there a most recent film that we might know?
This is making for really good podcast drama.
He was in an episode of the Roseanne's reboot. Yeah, he's in a lot of stuff. That's my.
Is he in Fringe?
Oh my god! When was Fringe made?
Did you just forget what you were looking at that for?
Yeah, I was just. Oh yeah, okay. Yes, he was in Fringe.
Boom!
One episode.
Yeah, I didn't say we're a season regular. I just said we were in Fringe. Anyway, now that we've established that, then we'll see you next month to talk about the Voyage Home. Bye bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Here we come, walking down the street.
The Search for Spock, supplemental. Hello, this is Ambassador Adams here, and I was definitely on an important Federation mission and not asleep. Honestly. Anyway, it all worked out in the end because Alexandria was going to be the one of the members anyway, and I was replacing them, and it turns out they were able to make it, so everything all worked out fine. However, I did have to watch Search for Spock because of that. Not that that was a big hardship, but because of that, I'm going to quickly just slot in my own few opinions on it, and then sort of go from there. Where's my paper? Sorry, data pad. Almost broke kayfabe there. So, in general, I thought it was an alright film. I'd say it's in the middle of the three we've already seen. It's definitely better than the first one, but I wouldn't say massively so. If the first one was, nah, this is, yeah, alright. It's fine. The Genesis planet looked nice. Kirk and Sarek did a brilliant job. I have to say, Shatner and, I've forgotten the name, Mark Leonard, did a wonderful job as Kirk and Sarek in this film. I think that they helped hold it together. And I liked the breakout scene. I think everyone loves that bit. And it's just a shame it happened so early in the film, because that was the best bit of the film. And obviously everything else seemed a bit of an anticlimax afterwards, apart from maybe the explosion of the Enterprise, which, you know, I can't say I felt massively sad about. I mean, I always feel sad when Spock goes, but I didn't quite for the ship, even though it is an iconic ship. I don't know how to feel about Cruge. I think that Christopher Lloyd elevates it, but as written, this character doesn't make sense. He kills too many people for randomly stupid reasons. As we're in neutral zone, I have to say that my feelings on David and Savick are sadly less than they were in the previous film. I don't think that the lady that plays Savick in this one is as good as the previous one. And I feel like David's just not as interesting when he doesn't have his mum to butt heads against. He's sort of all bland. I mean, he's not the worst thing in the world. My only major con, apart from, I guess, just how little actually really happened, even less so than the previous film, which, as I said, had just about enough to be able to cover everything. But compared with this film, it was night and day because so little happened, and it just felt like an episode of the show, really. But my two biggest cons, just for reference, I think him killing his girlfriend didn't make much sense. I know it was because she saw Genesis, but they just didn't make that clear enough. I only realised that after reading the Wikipedia page that was the reason. He just came off as an idiot. And the Grissom captain is one of the worst captains I think we've ever seen in Star Trek. I just wanted to punch him in the face. Everything about him was just obstructionist. I'm glad he got blown up. I mean, I probably shouldn't say that as an ambassador, but that is how I feel. But anyway, that was Search for Spock, and it certainly was a film, and that's all I can really say. I hope everyone had a great time on the Roundtable making it. Again, sorry I couldn't make it, but it all worked out. And the only really thing I can say to that is, Kapla.
We get the funniest looks from everyone we meet. Hey, we're the monkeys, and people say we're monkeying around. But we're too busy singing to put anybody down. We go wherever we want to, do what we like to do. We don't have time to get restless, there's always something new. Hey, we're the monkeys, and people say we monkey around. But we're too busy singing to put anybody down.
Up your shaft.